रुको ना भाई. So in the previous session, we have discussed about our balanced scorecard, and we are left with building block model. अरे रुको ना यार. Let me put this in silent mode. This is just boring. Okay. So we have building block models left, right? So balanced scorecard is done. Now, let me just very quickly talk about building block model, ma. So what exactly is this building block model all about, sir? First of all, you need to understand it's one of the performance measurement technique, ma. One of the performance measurement tool. Just like balanced scorecard, building block model is also one of a tool which is used for evaluating the performance of a company. Now, what exactly is the difference between balanced scorecard and building blocks, sir? If you recall, in balanced scorecard, we took 4 factors. What are the 4 factors? Can somebody very quickly talk about that 4 factors, ma? Customers, internal development, then your innovation and learning, that is research and development and employee training programs, then your financial factors. The 4 factors, the 4 criteria considered under the balanced scorecard: customer perspective, internal perspective, research and development, that is innovation and learning, and then financial perspectives. Similarly, in building block model, what we do is, so F&M, Fitzgerald and Moon, what they state is that, see, Fitzgerald and Moon, so these two people have devised a framework basically. So they tell you that there are 3 elements that you need to consider, or 3 blocks that you need to consider. What are those blocks, sir? The first block is called as the dimensions, ma. So the first block is called as dimensions. What exactly is this dimension, sir? Here we set the goals that are required. What do we do? In the dimensions block, we talk about the goals that are required to be set for the targets. Basically the criteria which are selected, that will be done in the dimensions block. Then what we'll do, the second block sets the standards, that is the targets that are given for the criteria set in the dimensions. See, for example, in the dimensions box, I'm talking about increase in revenue. Dimension, increase in revenue. Now, how much increase is required? That is set as a target in the standards block. So the standards block will tell you the target for the selected criteria. EPS is selected as a dimension. So how much should be the EPS is the standard for that. Then, sir, first we selected a criteria, we set a standard for that. Then what we will do? We will do the actual activity, we will compare that with the standard, and that surplus or deficit will be calculated, and based on that a result will be done and a reward will be issued. So first we'll set a dimension, we'll select a criteria, we'll set a standard for that, we'll set a target for that. Then based on these targets, we will give rewards to the respective persons. Okay, that is what building block model is all about. Now look at these 3. So the first one is dimensions, then the second one is the standards, and the third one is rewards. So select a dimension, select a criteria, set a standard for that, and based on that achievability, give a reward. Okay, sir, understood, sir. But what are these other words that are written over here? Okay, see, please understand, when we talk about the criteria, the dimensions, we talk about the criteria. What are those, sir? Profit, competitiveness, quality, resource utilization, flexibility, innovation. Okay, 6 dimensions are there. What are those 6 dimensions, sir? Profit, first of all. So profit talks about profit after tax, ROCE, ROI, GP ratio, NP ratio, or else EPS, DPS. All of these things are covered within the word profit. We are not only talking about profit after taxes. Any ratio that is concerned with the profit can be used as a dimension. Okay. It can be EPS also. Sir, EPS is packed by number of shares. So that is also profit only as a measure of each equity share. So even EPS is covered under the dimensions criteria. Then competitiveness, sir, market share. Comparatively, how much is your competitor doing versus what you are doing? Your total market, your particular industry or the product is doing $100 million sales. Out of that 100 million, how much is your business? That's 20%, sir. Okay, how much is your competitor doing? Sir, he's doing 23%. So he's doing 3% over and above you. So he is capturing more market share than you. That is called as competitiveness. Okay, then talking about the quality, customer complaints or else repeat customers, based on that you can calculate the quality of that. Resource utilization, how much raw material is being wasted, how much labor time is being wasted as idle time, all that stuff is covered under your resource utilization. Then we talk about flexibility. Flexibility is the speed at which we can modify our procedures and policies. Okay, how fast and how quick can we modulate our positions, that is covered under the flexibility. If the customer is asking for, buddy, I don't want this in red color, I want it in a different pattern, or I want it with a different packing. So are we able to do that? Are we able to flexibly modify our procedures and policies or not? That is what is covered under flexibility. Then innovation, how much research and development, employee training hours and all that stuff are we spending? That is covered under the innovation. Just a second, guys. Let me close off one particular options position that I'm having right now. This is a huge pain in the butt thing. Thank you. Sold. Okay. Next one is standards. So for these dimensions that we selected, we set the standards. So please understand, these standards should have certain characteristics. Whenever you are setting a target, these targets should have some characteristic attached to that. What is that characteristic, sir? First of all, it should make your employees feel motivated towards achieving them. They should feel a sense of ownership of that. Like, yes, we should do it. It's not we need to do it. It's we want to do it. There is a difference between need to do something versus wanting to do something. You study for an exam because you need to study, otherwise you will fail the exam. But some of us study because we want to study. We want to learn something new. We want to develop our skills. So there is a difference between need to do something versus wanting to do something. Sir, I'll tell you one very small example which you can easily understand. I'm not going to take the name of the students because that just creates a little bit of disturbance among you. But there is this one student, like 2.5 years back, I guess, 2.5 years back, 2 years, let's say 2 years. 2 years back, I was teaching financial reporting to this guy. He used to mess around in the class. Literally, if you see him, you feel that he's the most laziest guy in the lecture, in the entire classroom. Like the rest of the students will give you answers, they will do the problems and all that stuff. This guy sits like this, just looking at me like this. Literally, he just looks me at like this, look at me like this, and he's on his mobile most of the time. And I don't care whether he's working on his mobile or whether he is listening to the class or whether he's taking the notes. He never takes notes for that matter. He carries one rough book for all the subjects, one book only for all the subjects that he is attending. And I guess maybe 3 days or 4 days before the exam, I usually conduct this rapid quick revision. I think Azim is telling the name of the student. No, crazy. Yeah, okay, cool. Suits me. Yes, ma. Okay, cool. Crazy. Huh. So this guy, 3-4 days before the exam, I usually conduct, what do you call it? A rapid revision kind of a thing. And he came, he sat, rest of the students are answering. He was just looking at me. I went to him after the session and I asked him, what happened? Are you not yet done with your portion or what? He's like, sir, I understood everything that you are saying. Azim, I know. That's why I'm not giving you the name. So he told me, no, sir, I'm understanding the entire concepts and I am not comfortable in doing more problems. He's not comfortable in doing practice, exam kits, revision kits and all. So I guess one day before the exam or something, he just went through the exam kit and past papers, like just buffering through them. And this guy cleared the exam. With literally 1 day of preparation, he cleared the exam. That's the difference between wanting to learn something versus need to learn something. Rest of the students are sitting there because they are afraid of the exam. This guy is sitting there because he wanted to learn something. And for your kind information, he is doing his last paper of ACCA now. Okay, he did APM with me and he cleared it with good score. Literally, we did APM in 10 days. One-on-one session it was, me and him. We completed the entire APM portion in 10 days. Imagine the pace. So it was just concepts. We were not doing dumb questions and all. So your employees also, the moment they feel motivated towards doing something, they own that targets. Okay, they say that, yes, we are doing this for ourselves, not because somebody asked us to do. That is called as ownership. Okay, this is very important for goal congruence as well. Now at PM level, you may not understand the importance of that. But when you move on to APM, you will understand the importance of understanding how ownership impacts the psychological behavior of the employees of your company. Then achievability. Already first day we discussed, the targets should not be too rigid, otherwise they'll feel demotivated. They should not be too easy, otherwise they'll feel lethargic. So it should be achievable and motivating at the same time. And equity. Sir, what do you mean by equity, ma? So there is a difference between equity and equality. When we are talking about equity, where did they did not cover only these topics. This is dumb. They should explain to you what they are trying to tell. Okay. Sir, there is a difference between equity and equality, ma. If I'm talking about equality, I'll tell that, okay, everybody should be treated equal. Everybody should be given the same targets. That's equality, but that's dumb. That is absolutely dumb. Your targets should not be equal. They should be equity based, not equality based. Sir, confused. Okay, let me tell you, ma. If there are two employees and I am giving the same target to both of them, now I'm telling myself that, wow, I'm doing a great thing. I'm treating everybody equal. No, you are the most dumbest person on the earth. You should give a target based on the capabilities of that particular person, not equal targets to everyone. Based on their capabilities, based on their target achievability levels, based on their intellectuality levels, based on their previous performances, based on the expectations from them, different targets should be given to each individual employee. But those targets should not be, what do you call it, absurd, or else I can say they should not be biased towards any particular person. So see, if one person can achieve 70, I may give him a target of achieving 75. But another person who has the capability to do 90, I should not give him 75 target. That's dumb. I need to give him 92 or 93. Okay, that is called equity in the targets, not equality. Hope all of you understood. Moving to the next one, that is the rewards. So okay, we selected some criteria, 6 criteria we selected. Some of them are upstream, some of them are downstream. Let's not worry about that. PMA you don't need to learn. At APM we'll talk about more about upstream and downstream, but we understood the 6 criteria that are covered in the dimensions, then the 3 standards that are set for that, the targets that are set. Now coming to the rewards portion. Now when we talk about the rewards, there are 3 characteristics that should be there, qualities. One is the clarity of the reward. You should be very clear what happens when somebody achieves the target. Okay, you do this, you get this. It should be very clear. It should give the motivation to the employees to meet those targets. Okay, if I do this, I'm going to get that. So it should be motivating for that particular employee. And then controllability. This is a very important factor, sir. Controllability is something like, if I'm giving you something, a target, it should be within your control to reach that or not to reach that. Okay, external factors, if they're influencing, then I cannot say that it is your performance related. I gave you a sales target of 10,000 units to be done. Sir, you did 6,000 units in the first half itself. I gave you 10,000 units for 1 month. First 15 days only you did already 6,000 or 7,000 units. And then suddenly there was, a recession, or else market crash, or else COVID, or whatever it is. There was something external factor because of which entire market has collapsed. Not just your productivity, entire market has collapsed. Now, if it was within your control, you could have easily crossed the target in the remaining 15 days, maybe. But out of your control, something happened. So I should not consider those external factors while giving you a reward. I should reward you based on your performance, which are within your controllability, not out of your controllability. So these are the 3 blocks relating to the building block. Now, first of all, talking about the dimensions, these are the criteria that are set: profit criteria, competitiveness, quality, then resource utilization, innovation, and your flexibility of the processes. These are the 6 characteristics. Then standards should be set based on that. The standards should give ownership to the employees. They should be achievable, and they should be equity. And then coming to the rewards point, it should be clarity should be maintained. It should motivate the employees to achieve those targets, and it should be based on the controllable levels of activities and policies and procedures. So that's your building block model, guys. So they have given you different measures for those each dimensions, each element of the dimensions. These are very important for you to read. So please read this later. Okay. This is very important. So please read this later. That brings us to the end of chapter number, what is it, 12, 13? 13. Chapter number 13 is done. So moving on to chapter number 14, sir. No time to waste. Very quickly. Did I start the recording? Yes. Okay. For a second, I was like, okay, I forgot to start the recording. Chalo. Chapter number 14, divisional performance measurement and transfer pricing. Oh God, markets are roaring like anything. Shit. Okay. Divisional performance measurement and transfer pricing. So this chapter, we are going to talk about Divisions, ma. So what are these divisions, sir? First of all, can somebody confirm in the chat section? Is everything fine? And please say, what do you understand by the word division? Confirm in the chat section, guys, everybody. Are you all there? Now, what exactly are these divisions that we are talking about, sir? Any business unit, ma, any independent unit of your business is called as a division. For that matter, I can say that, you know, if you're having 5 different branches, each branch is a division, ma. Okay, similarly, if I'm talking about departments, you have 5 departments. Each department is a division. Or if you have sales units, each unit can be called as a division. So any part of your business that is independently managed, or I can say decisions are taken at that particular unit level, then we call that unit as a division. Okay, so if suppose you have 4 different branches and each branch has a manager who takes decisions relating to that branch, now each branch can be called as a different division for that matter. But if decisions, all the decisions are taken at central level only, there are no divisional managers, there are no branch managers, then it won't be called as a division. Okay, they are just units of your business, but they're not strategic units of your business. Please understand that. Okay, now when in this particular chapter, divisional performance measurement and transfer pricing, we are going to talk about 2 different elements, ma. Okay, so in this chapter 14, we are going to talk about 2 elements. What are those 2 elements, sir? First element is divisional performance, and the second one is transfer pricing. Okay, sir, what is divisional performance? First topic is divisional performance. So here we are going to talk about how to evaluate the performance of a given business now. So there are 2 techniques which we use. What are those 2 techniques, sir? One is called as ROCE and the other one is called ROI. Okay, this is wrong, not ROCE. I'm so sorry. I just get used to the normal techniques. Okay, one is ROI, and the other one is RI. What are those 2? One is ROI, return on investment, and the other one is RI, that is residual income. We are going to talk about these 2, return on investment, and the second one is RI. We are going to talk about residual income. Okay, now here we are going to talk about goal congruence. Now if you guys remember, goal congruence is working towards the common goal of the company rather than individual goals, right? Do you remember that? Goal congruence, working towards the common goal of the company rather than having individual goals and independent targets. Now, in transfer pricing, what is transfer pricing, sir? Within the departments, from one division to another division, when the goods are transferred, okay, what should be the price of the transfer? How should we fix the transfer pricing within our departments? That is what is covered in transfer pricing. Okay. Now, sir, why is transfer pricing important? Please understand, ma. If my division is transferring goods to another division within the same company, do you think I'll sell at the market price to the other division? Obviously no, right? If you are selling something outside person, you will sell it at a better price. If you are selling it to friends and family, obviously you will sell it at a lesser price, right? Same thing happens within the companies also. Usually divisional prices are much lesser than the market prices. Usually, not always true. Usually internal transfers are less valued compared to external transfers. So because of that, what happens is the overall ratios of the selling division comes down. I can sell in the market for 100, but I'm selling to my division at 80. So I'm losing that $20 profit, right? So because of that, what will happen to my overall profit? Overall profit will come down, correct? So when my overall profits are coming down, obviously my ratios will be impacted because of that. Guys, I'm so sorry, I have to take this. Okay, sorry for that. So we were talking about the divisional performance and transfer pricing. So these are the two elements that are covered in this particular chapter. So let's start with the discussion. So, okay, look at this. This entire chapter talks about divisional performance and transfer pricing. Now, when I'm talking about the divisional performance, first we need to understand what are the different types of divisions. There could be cost centers, there could be revenue centers, and there could be profit centers. These are the three different types of centers that are there: cost centers, revenue centers, and profit centers. Now, cost centers only incur cost. They do not have any revenues as such. Okay, they do not have any kind of revenue. They don't directly contribute towards the sales. These are ancillary services or ancillary units. Purchase department does not deal with sales. They only purchase. They only have cost. Labor only have cost. IT services, your information technology, software services, backups, accounting services, all of these are cost incurring departments, but they don't have sales as such. Okay, so for them, how do I evaluate, sir? Based on the cost per unit or variances, like what was the budgeted cost and what is the actual cost, and then different non-financial performance indicators, NFPI, non-financial performance indicators like productivity, raw material wastage, or efficiency levels, all that stuff we are gonna talk about in cost centers. Then when I'm talking about the revenue centers, okay, revenue centers are basically where they have both cost as well as revenue. Sir, please understand, they have both cost as well as revenue. Your textbooks talk about division is only responsible for the generation of revenue, but this is not actually true. You know, when you talk about in CMA and other syllabuses, which are more core costing related, I'm talking about CMA US or CIMA, SIMA UK. When you learn this pure cost related courses, there we say that revenue centers have both cost as well as revenue. Profit centers, they take decisions relating to investments as well. That's the major difference. But in your textbook, they say revenue centers only have revenue. So you learn it like that because you need to pass the exam as well. But I'm telling you what is the actual truth also. Okay. So sales department, see, for example, they're telling you sales department is a revenue center. Doesn't sales department have any cost? Don't you pay salaries to your sales employees and marketing employees and advertisement and all those people? So that's the biggest problem. They say revenue is only the factor, but they do have costs as well. But anyways, your textbook says that revenue centers are only revenues. Okay. Now for them, what do we calculate, sir? How do we measure their performance? Revenue per unit, or else variances relating to the sales. What was the budgeted sales? What is the actual sales? What are the targeted sales? One after the other. Everybody is being a pain in the butt for me. You know, I agreed to teach these people guest lectures, and now they want me to set the question papers for their internal college examinations. You give a little bit of lenience to the people and then they start climbing on top of you like anything. Chalo. Next one is investment centers. Investment centers. So these centers basically have both, sorry, profit centers. Okay, I'm so sorry. So profit centers, oh God, they split revenue centers and profit centers and investment centers. That's bad. Okay, cool. So revenue centers do not really exist if that is the case, because no such division has only revenues and no costs. Now profit centers are those which have both cost as well as revenue. Acha, okay. But they do not have any authority to alter the levels of investments in that particular division. Investment decisions are taken by the investment centers. So they are just trying to split this into multiple levels. I don't think this is actually applicable in the real world, but you need to learn. You need to learn this because it's important for your examination. So you have cost centers, which are basically incur only cost, revenue centers, which incur only revenues, profit centers, which have both cost and revenue, but no investment decisions. Then you have investment centers, which have the capability or authority to take decisions relating to investment, how much money should be kept in, how much capital should be bought into the business and all that stuff. Okay. So these are the different analysis or different factors or indicators that we use to measure their performances. But this is why I take classes in the morning and not evenings, because by this time already lots of disturbances will spoil the mindset of the person. Chalo, cool. Calm down. Okay, let's move on to the next topic, that is return on investment and residual income. So let me tell you a very, very interesting factor When you go to APM, the difference between these two is going to be so crucial for your examination as well. So crucial. Why ROI is not a good indicator to evaluate a performance of a division, and why should we use RI instead of ROI? So now itself I'll tell you because it is covered. So let's talk about that. What is ROI, ma? Return on investment. Yesterday, when I discussed about the financial ratios, I told you the difference between ROCE and ROI. How many of you remember that? How many of you remember the difference between ROCE and ROI? ROCE talks about return for the entire capital employed for the entire business. ROI, investment in one particular project or one particular division. So that's why for a division we do not have ROCE, we have ROI, because we invest in a division, we employ our capital in the business. Okay, if I'm purchasing shares of the company, I purchase shares of entire company. How does the company utilize that money? It is company's internal policy. So they will decide whether they should go only for the one particular division or spread it among different divisions. How do they invest that money is the company's policy. I am giving for the entire company. I am employing capital in the entire company. Investment is done by the company in a specified project. Okay, sir. Agreed. Understood. Wonderful, sir. Now look at the question very, very, very carefully, guys. Okay. Now with this one question, you should be able to understand the entire difference between ROI and RA. Okay. Sir, company is raising money. Okay. Cost of capital. I hope you guys know what is cost of capital. We are raising funds at say 8%, sir. Our cost of capital is 8%. We borrowed money at 8%. Assume that net of taxes. Now, investment required for this particular project is say $500,000. Okay, $500,000 is the investment in the project. Okay, and returns, this profit after tax or profit before interest and tax, whatever it is, they are giving you the net return this project giving me is say $60,000. $60,000. Okay, sir, existing ROI of the branch, existing ROI of the division is 10%. Means what? So this division is one of the best divisions in our company. So if you give them $100, they're going to give you 110. They are going to, this division has the capability or the capacity to generate 10% returns. Okay. So see, your company's cost of capital is 8%. This particular division is generating 10%. Now you are very much happy with this company, aren't you? You're so happy with this company, with this particular division, because they are giving you better than the cost of capital. They're giving you 2% net returns. Okay, in absolute terms, 2% net results they are giving you. Now, sir, you went to the division manager and told him, buddy, we have this new investment proposal. If we ask you, if we give you this 500,000, you can enter into this particular contract, and this contract will give you 60,000. Now, what does the manager of this particular division say, sir? Will he agree to this or will he disagree? Will he accept this proposal or will he reject the proposal? Come on, guys. What is the ROI for this particular project? Can somebody very quickly calculate and tell me ROI for the project? Nobody calculated, sir. What is the return on investment for this particular project, ma? For this particular project, what is the return on investment? ROI is equal to 60,000 is the returns divided by 500,000 is the investment. That means how much is the returns percentage? 8.5 or something, if I'm not wrong. 12%. Okay, let's make this a little bit less, guys. We'll make this 40. No, we'll make this 45,000. Make this 45,000. Sir, why, sir? Otherwise, again, I'll have to give you a different example. So 45,000 divided by 500,000. Can somebody very quickly tell me what is the ratio? What is the percentage? What is the return percentage? 9%. Very good, sir. Thank you. 9% is the return from this particular project. Okay. Now, sir, very quickly tell me, will this division manager accept the project or reject the project? Quick. Only 4 minutes for the session. Accept or reject. If you are the division manager, will you accept or reject, sir? Tejasvi says reject. Swarna says accept. Okay. So please understand, this division manager will reject the project. He'll be like, sir, my existing returns are 10%. If I take up this project, it will drop down. You're asking me to take up a project that gives me only 9%, whereas my existing returns are 10%. Why do I want to reduce my returns? This is the biggest problem with ROI. Managers may tend to reject the projects even though they are profitable, because they are giving you lesser profits. But if you see for the company as an overall company is raising money only at 8%. If this project is giving you 9%, it is giving you better returns than your cost. It is giving you positive NPV. You should accept this project. Technically speaking, you should accept this project. But this manager is rejecting because it is giving you less than the existing ROI. This is the biggest problem with ROI. Okay, biggest problem with ROI. Now, sir, what is RI then? RI is residual income. Residual means after paying the notional interest, what is left is the residual income. If you have positive residual income, you should accept it because you still have money left. Okay, sir, what is this project investment? 500,000, correct? Investment is 500,000. Okay, returns from the project 45,000 is given, and notional interest or notional cost 500,000 you are investing, and your cost of the capital for your company is 8%. So 500 into 8% is 40,000. You are getting a return of 45. You are still having a positive value of 5,000. So accept the project. RI accepts the project. ROI of project is less than divisional ROI in this case. So this will be rejected in this particular case. Sir, a profitable project is rejected if I'm using ROI. But if I'm using RI, a profitable project is accepted. Okay, that is the difference between ROI and RI. See, ROI talks about profit by capital employed. Sir, please pay attention to the word here, controllable profit. This is the biggest mistake which students do. They take profit. No, it's controllable profit for that particular division. Okay. When I'm talking about divisional ROI, I always talk about controllable profit for that particular division. If something is decided at the head office level, I should not consider that to be a factor while considering the ROI. Sir, can you give an example? Okay. Salaries of your divisional employees, They are both determined by the head office and paid by the head office. Determined by head office, paid by head office. So in such kind of cases, you should not include that expenditure while calculating the return on investment. You should only take the controllable factors. Are you able to understand? So take the profit before the employee cost, and also in the capital employed also remove the employee cost. Remove the employee cost both from numerator and denominator, and then calculate controllable ROI. Okay. That is when you can evaluate a division's individual capabilities and capacity. But if you are doing directly the entire profit and some of them are decided by the head office, then how can I say the division is working good or bad? The decisions are taken at head office level. So that should be very key point. Controllable profits are capital employed should be taken. Okay, and then there is one more situation which is not covered for you here. So you are lucky, no problem. Okay. Advantages and disadvantages, less than 1 minute. Okay, cool. Let's take break after this session, sir. No, that things does not work out for me. Again, I